some kind of, paper trail on text messages that traces to a coaching staff, different story. But I think where it's gotten just kind of ridiculous is you have collectives, and we've done a lot of stories at The Athletic about agents working on deals where maybe there's a 3-star, 4-star player getting 6 figures. Well, the idea that some deal is being done where a coaching staff does not know or hasn't had some kind of feedback or direction for these money people to go buy a recruiter, do a deal, is preposterous to me. Because all of a sudden you're going to spend all this money on a recruit that they don't really want. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because if that's the case, what's going to happen when this player shows up and you're like, we don't think he can play? Yeah, but we spent $700,000 for him. That's ridiculous, right? So for some of the coaches, and I think Jimbo has kind of talked about this in the past, it just doesn't make any sense.
Here's Jimbo Fisher firing back at Nick Saban. Take a listen to this.
It's a shame that we have to do this. It's really despicable. It's despicable that somebody can say things about somebody and an organization. More importantly, 17-year-old kids. You're taking shots at 17-year-old kids and their families. And they broke state laws. They're all money. We bought every player on this group. We never bought anybody. No rules were broken. Nothing was done wrong. It was all in the way we do things, the ethics in which we do things. And these families, it's despicable that a reputable head coach could come out and say this when he doesn't get his way or things don't go his way.
Now, he also made it really personal. I want to play this one and have you respond. This is the second, Jimbo, really going after Saban.
Some people think they're God. Go dig into how God did his deal. You may find out about a guy that a lot of things you don't want to know. We built him up to be the czar of football. Go dig into his past.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
Saban's never been busted by the NCAA.
No, and look, the one thing, and you brought this up about Ole Miss before, and back in the Hugh Freeze days, there were a lot of 4- and 5-star guys that they didn't get, that, in-state guys, they went to another school. Maybe they went to a rival school. So you start to sit there and wonder, as like, okay, only these people are breaking the rules, but these other people who are thriving and getting some, they're recruiting largely the same pool of players. So all of a sudden you're telling me that these other guys are going to be open to 7 figures, but no. None of that's going on at other places or whatever that's competing and beating them. That's not realistic, right? And I think where Jimbo is talking about, he's putting it on Saban as making these allegations against the 17-year-olds and their families. I mean, let's be realistic. Jimbo's taking it personal because he's saying you cheated. A lot of times I think, and this has gone on, I go back to the Arizona State scandal that is still going on, at Herm Edwards' program, where it started getting out because a lot of former assistants would talk about it, but also recruits would talk about to other coaches what was going on. A lot of times recruits don't know exactly what the rules are right now.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't necessarily think, if they see it as NIL or how it's interpreted, as inducements, who's boosters. I don't even think, the NCAA has tried to define who boosters are, and it's a very it's a different threshold. But I don't necessarily think if you're talking about 16, 17-year-old recruits and their families, I'm not sure they're versed in that.
Yeah.
I don't think they're necessarily on the phone with compliance about every person that interacts with them. Whereas I think in the case of these coaches, especially at this level, come on, what's going on here?
Yeah, now it's legal, NIL. All right, Mario Cristobal, Miami, because USC, because of the Oklahoma battle with USC, Lincoln Riley's making a lot of noise. Plus, we're in L.A., which is the biggest media market out here. Miami, what are they doing?
So Mario Cristobal was at a place at Oregon where obviously Phil Knight money, and they're obviously very active in NIL and a lot of things, but best facilities are arguably and every resource you could need. He was not going to even consider, going anyplace else unless the powers that be at Miami ramped up commitment dramatically. And he waited till after his season was over, and then all of a sudden they made a dramatically different commitment in terms of what they were able to do for him, staff-wise, facility-wise. Miami used to be the place that would puff out its chest that we don't want the kids who are going to be swayed by fancy facilities and different things like that. Well, that was 20 years ago.
Kids like that stuff.
Kids like that stuff now. And Mario Cristobal, who used to be one of the ones who would talk about that when he was a young assistant coach there, now he knows what matters. They're in on the photo shoots. They're in on all this other stuff. And Miami's commitment, you see it in, like you said, there are a lot of parallels to USC, right? Big marketplaces. There are places that there's a competition for.
They almost feel like USC and Miami are the only two college programs that feel like 25% NFL. They kind of have an NFL vibe to them.
Well, they're also the way they've operated even schematically. Miami, back in the Schnellenberger days was really one of the first ones to go wide open pass when everything else was the wishbone days, right? I mean, just think about the resources when you can have a Hall of Famer on staff, right? Somebody
Yes.
I mean, that Miami was able to bring in. I mean, this never had. They beat Michigan for Josh Gaddis, who just won the Broyles Award as the nation's top assistant. He leaves there to come to Miami. There was a lot of it's just so much different now than what it used to be. USC obviously has always had money. USC has always had boosters. Miami has been kind of a shoestring operation with less than facilities. And so to see that now turning, and obviously they're sitting in the biggest recruiting hotbed in the country, but he has taken, Cristobal worked under Jimmy Johnson, but he also worked under Nick Saban. And everything we talked about for this story, a lot of it is in the Saban blueprint.
So I talked to a well-connected consultant of college football, and he said, listen, Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, with no transfers, would have won 7 games in the Pac-12. It's terrible. He said those two that's McVay Stafford. You can have holes. I mean, the Rams O-line had issues. The linebackers weren't good. They had injuries at safety. Stafford, McVay, you can compete with anybody. And throw onto that, they have been wildly active in the transfer portal. They've upgraded receiver, running back, corner, edge rush. What are realistic expectations for Lincoln, Caleb, who I was told by an NFL general manager, Caleb Williams would have been the number 1 pick this year, and he's better than Stroud. Now, this was a GM, a playoff GM, said that kid is totally different.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go so far as to say he's better than C.J. Stroud.
I know, it's what he told me.
But he's definitely really talented. Here's the thing I would say pump the brakes on a little bit. We did a USC game late last year. The coaching staff was in disarray. The program was in disarray.
Total disarray.
Roster not good. It had fallen apart. UCLA mauled them. They put up 60-plus points on them.
Those days are over.
I think what will be a challenge for them, I don't disagree with what you were told about just with Caleb and Lincoln, they win 7 games. In the Pac-12, yes. If they were in the SEC, no.
No.
But in the Pac-12, yes. The Pac-12 is nowhere near what it was when even Pete Carroll was the coach there.
It's the worst. In my lifetime, it's the worst it's ever been.
Wow.
It is. Now, I think Oregon with Bo Nix could be interesting. Utah's the best roster this morning.
Utah is the best roster. I think UCLA is a legit team because, like Utah, they are really physical. They have arguably the best running back in the league. They have a proven quarterback. I mean, to me, those two teams will give them some problems. Where I think it's going to be interesting with USC, they were so bad on defense, and the roster has been so bad on defense. Like, I think Alex Grinch is a terrific coach. He knows this conference. He was Mike Leach's best hire when he was at Washington State. He got a terrible defense pretty good in a hurry. I think they probably are a 9-win. Maybe they can win 10 games.
Woo!
I don't think they're a playoff team because they were so bad on defense. And now you're talking about they're adding guys, but it's not like they're adding guys who are going to be stars in the SEC. They're adding probably better players, but they were just I can't get over how bad they were when I saw them last year. I mean, maybe in 2023. Then they're a real playoff contender if they add to it. It'll probably be Caleb's last year.
Yeah.
You'll add more recruits. I think more time for Lincoln's culture. Lincoln gives them an identity. That's what USC had been missing for so long, right? They had an identity when Pete was there. And then it was just kind of digging out of sanctions and everything else. Whether they get Jordan Addison or not, we'll see what happens the next day or two. But he will definitely help. I mean, because the receiving core is deeper probably than it was, but it doesn't have, Drake London anymore, right?
Yeah.
And the offensive line is okay, but the defense is, to me, when Pete Carroll had it rolling.
Your front seven had 6 NFL players.
Yeah, and there was a Mike Patterson, those guys were studs.
Yeah.
You had good guys in the back end. They had higher star players recently, but they didn't really live up to it.
Right.
So let's see what Grinch on that side of the ball can do. I think they will be better this year and probably a lot better 2 years from now or a year from now. But, it's good that USC is relevant again for college football.
Yes.
It's certainly good for the Pac-12. It's certainly good for Fox, by the way.
Yeah, of course it is. That's all we care about, really. All right.
I've heard. I've watched the show. I've seen the clips.
Bruce Feldman, great stuff. Joy Taylor with the news.
No.